We have to have a vision of where we think the country needs to go, how we protect our planet, how we ensure that our children have a future, how we educate our children, and how we turn this around. That's why we're here. We're fighters.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. This week I'm joined by woman thought leader Representative Barbara Lee of California. Northern California, correct?
That's right.
One of the most beautiful areas in the country.
And one of the wokest areas in the country.
So tell me about women and climate change. Why would you combine, how is climate change different for women and girls than it is for men and boys?
Sure. When you look at the impact of climate change and, for instance, what women do, their work, especially not only here in our own country but throughout the world, women are impacted by climate change because they do a lot of the work that climate change impacts. For example, agricultural work. When you look at the fact that they don't make a lot of money and can't provide resources to put solar panels on their homes or to do what's necessary to impact climate change, it's women who are going to be negatively impacted. Women are vulnerable, are part of our vulnerable population category. And so climate change impacts where they live. The economic aspects of climate change are very real in terms of women who make less money than men and who have to scramble in many ways to feed their children and to take care of their families. And so it negatively impacts women in a way that it impacts most vulnerable populations throughout the world.
Cancer Alley in Louisiana is one example that comes to mind of a place where low-income people were disproportionately affected by the outflow in the air and the water of petroleum plants and oil plants, and they were the ones who, because of the cost of real estate, lived closest to those plants, got most exposed to the toxic chemicals.
Absolutely, and you look at breast cancer rates and you look at asthma rates, not only in Cancer Alley, but you look right in my own area in terms of this Chevron, and look at in my district in terms of West Oakland, the trucks that had idled in communities, the emissions from the toxins from the trucks have created a situation now where women and people of color are disproportionately impacted by lung disease, by asthma. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, in a community where we lived with mainly Latinx individuals and African Americans. A smelter was sited right near our neighborhood. Smoke each and every day, and we didn't know what it was, but come to find out this was toxic pollutants coming from these smelters. And in fact, many of my contemporaries died before they were 50 years old. Many have chronic diseases, and it's directly related to the siting of this smelter. And in fact, there have been lawsuits, and NPR actually did a big story on what happened in El Paso. So yes, the impacts of climate change and of citing these polluters in communities, low-income communities, communities where women and men live, communities of color, it's really devastating, and that's another disproportionate impact on our communities.
What do you think about when you see these impacts on these communities, when you see floods all over Florida and really up and down the East Coast, and you see these toxic chemicals being emitted, and we have a president in office who doesn't even believe that climate change exists? How does that make you feel? How does it change how Congress views climate change?
Well, what it does is it makes me, first of all, angry, but have to turn this angry into action, and that's why I do the legislation and have worked really in the environmental movement for many, many years. When I see the dismantling, for example, of the Environmental Protection Agency, our Clean Water Act, all of the environmental regulations that we fought for. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, of course, I'm always trying to, along with my Democratic colleagues, to try to stop these regulations from being unraveled and stop the funding for any administration that is going to do that. And so we've slid much further backwards now under the Trump administration than we've ever been. Look at Flint, look at lead. There's lead not only in the water in Flint and how the impacts on African Americans and low-income children and the black community and low-income communities in Flint, Michigan, has been devastating. Some lifetime
But that
diseases.
happened, but that all took
Decisions.
place, right, before President Trump was in office,
Sure,
correct?
but again, these are decisions. It's an example of decisions that are made by any office holder or any government official that really allows for the devastation of communities and the health impacts that could be deadly to people who live in those areas. And this Trump administration is just magnifying a lot of what has happened throughout the country at a national level. And so that's why we have to fight hard to make sure personally that we reverse some of the backward slide, because these are policies that are really going to harm people in a very deadly way, in a very unhealthy way.
What will it take to get his supporters to recognize that? Or will the harm come so far after he's out of office, be it after one term or two terms, or after the impeachment hearings, who knows, before people recognize, and especially his low-income supporters, of which he has many, that these regulations he's undoing are making their very communities much more unlivable?
I don't think you can convince many of his supporters of anything. And so we have to educate the majority of the public, which is not the climate deniers or Donald Trump supporters. We have to really make sure that members of the public understand that the rise in sea levels, the floods, the tornadoes, the hurricanes, the weather changes, climate change is here. And the science proves that. We're not talking about anything that is unscientific. The science shows what is taking place. So Trump's supporters who are climate deniers, I don't think anything will convince them of the fact that their lives could be destroyed as a result of this president and his policies. But what we have to do is broaden the public debate, and I'm really happy to be able to talk with you, because we have to educate the public and let them know that the weather changes and what they're seeing now is a direct result of corporate greed, polluters, and climate deniers. And this administration is leading the charge.
But, you know, progressives have not been very successful, have they, at getting their preferences enacted into schools. One thing you want to do is make climate education part of the public school system, and yet Democrats fought for years and years and years to get full sex education in the classes. It was there for a while. Then conservatives were able to change it to abstinence only, which is really not sex education at all. It's certainly not anything about biological human intercourse. So why do you think that you would be able to push through climate change education when the school boards seem to be, and maybe I'm wrong, but you know, with the blue wave and everything that's going across the country, but the local school boards seem to be very conservative in their approach to what children should learn?
First, I carry the legislation, still carrying it, that would call for comprehensive sex education in schools. I've been carrying this legislation for years now, and we're going to get there. We also see this administration defunding teen pregnancy prevention programs.
And teen pregnancy rates rise
when that happens. And so just because we have an administration who's going to say no doesn't mean we don't say yes and keep fighting. And so just as the climate change issue, okay, if we thought that nothing could pass, and if we thought that we're doing this just for the heck of doing it, then why are we here? We have to have a vision of where we think the country needs to go, how we protect our planet, how we ensure that our children have a future, how we educate our children, and how we turn this around. That's why we're here. We're fighters. We have to make sure that we do the right thing, not look at the fact that the administration may not pass it or it may not get through Congress. I mean, we have a lot of work to do, and the American people elected us here to do that work, not to say, oh, just because they're not going to move on it or because they turned the clock back, we don't think you should move forward. So we have breakthroughs, and it can be done. And so I'm going to be forever optimistic that it may take a long time. This is a marathon, but we're going to get it done.
Tell me about the reproductive rights legislation that you are sponsoring, and start out by telling everybody what the Hyde Amendment is. It was very famous when I covered Congress in the 80s. Of course, it was all over the place, and I believe it was enacted in the 70s.
77, I think.
And but tell everybody what it is and why it's important.
Well, and I want to relate this to what you just talked about, and what we just talked about in terms of why do something if it can't be done, and if they tell you it can't be done.
Please.
Okay, the Hyde Amendment was passed. I was the chief of staff to a great member of Congress, Ron Dellums, in the 70s.
I remember him very well. A man of great stature in more ways than one.
And he was a feminist in many ways. Henry Hyde offered this amendment that would deny low-income women and women who didn't have any money or access to health care, mainly women of color, access to their full constitutional rights for reproductive health care. Now, we have Roe versus Wade, right? Every woman has a right to determine what she wants to do with her body. If she chooses to have an abortion, she has that constitutional right. The Hyde Amendment denies women that right if they don't have any money or any insurance. That amendment has been put in the appropriations bill since the 70s. And of course, it's been in many ways the holy grail of this whole legislative process here. Fast forward to very recently, 6, 7 years ago, I got tired of that. I got tired of my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, saying, well, the Hyde Amendment is there, we can't do anything about it. I'm saying, wait a minute. Is this something that low-income women, women of color are just going to have to live with, continually being denied their constitutional right to the full range of reproductive health care? I said, no more. And I was told, oh, you can't touch that. Again, that's too controversial. Just let it be. Okay, so for a while, I let it be. Finally, these young women from the All Above All Coalition, I've got to give them a heck of a lot of credit. These are young women and some men, mainly women of color. And they formed these coalitions around the country, and they went and they educated members of Congress as to why the Hyde Amendment was discriminatory. So we met, we talked, and for a couple of years the time wasn't right because we didn't have quite what we needed to introduce the bill. But they kept working, and they kept working, and they kept, again, told no, keep working. So finally we decided to introduce the bill, and I had to go to the major pro-choice organizations and make the case. Believe it or not, I had to make the case, and they understood it.
Can you explain for me, let me interrupt you for a moment, why does it come up every year? I mean, you think about, for example, President Clinton enacted legislation that banned the use of automatic weapons. And it's only because that expired, it had a time limit on it, that America doesn't have that protection anymore. And there have been so many mass shootings with automatic weapons. So why is it that the Hyde Amendment, is it just passed every year by Congress?
In the appropriations bill because no
Why
one
don't
wants
they
to
drop
take
it? Why don't they just drop it?
Because of the controversy around, if we dropped it, we may not get the votes to pass the bill. Okay, so that's where the public education and public awareness comes in. Maybe next year we'll be able to do that. But what I did 5 or 6 years ago was finally introduce the legislation that would take the Hyde Amendment away. And I was told, okay, fine, and the pro-choice groups really understood it, but they were initially reluctant, but it was like, it's time. And these young women did it. So we introduced it, And we introduced it with 30 co-sponsors. That was unheard of for a policy that you're not going to get any support. Then we kept working on it. Now, guess what? I have 170 co-sponsors. We're trying to get to 200 so we can get it onto the floor. We have members here who never would have signed on, have understood now why it's discriminatory against a certain group of women in this country. They say it's wrong. And we have the polling data that shows that the public really believes there should be equal treatment based on what the Constitution allows in terms of reproductive health care. And so we're going to get there. But again, it's taken since 1977, and since I've been here in
Really
Congress.
since 72 with Roe, right?
Yeah, with Roe. That's when Roe passed, but then Hyde did this in the mid-70s. He did this 76, 77. Mm-hmm. And so here we are in 2019, and I'm still trying to repeal it. But that shows you the marathon that this process requires, and it shows you how public awareness, lobbying, holding your members accountable, making sure that members of Congress understood the facts, why that process is important in terms of our democratic process. And so, again, we're going to get there. And I want to, again, salute the All Above All Coalition and our pro-choice groups because they have helped tremendously to get us to 170 co-sponsors.
It's interesting to me that on hot-button issues, if one takes the conservative, even the extreme conservative position, it's politically okay. But if you take even a not very extreme progressive position, oh, don't touch that.
Yeah.
Why is that?
When I was in California legislature, we had a very conservative right-wing governor. And I introduced legislation that was very progressive because we had a very extreme right-wing administration. And I got more of my bills signed than anyone during the period I was there. And you know why? Because I started here, they started there, and we had places we could go in terms of negotiating. And that's what happened. And so that's why I think progressives must start in a progressive position, or anyone, because if you start in the middle, where do you go? But to the right. And if you want to have a decent compromise, and if you want to be able to work together in a bipartisan way and across ideological lines, you've got to start with what you believe in on the cutting edge, because believe you me, the right wing is starting on their cutting edge, but that gives you a chance. And that's what I've been able to do through the HIV Global AIDS Initiative, PEPFAR, the Global Fund, all of the issues I've worked with Republicans on, and that's what we have to do. You can't start in the center and think we're going to achieve the goals of equality and justice and fairness for everyone.
I want to get back for a second to climate change and the youth movement that has bubbled up around this issue. Why do you think that is?
Young people really understand that the future is theirs, first of all, and they want to protect the planet, and they want to protect their future. They want to secure their future. But also, young people have a sense, a moral compass, and I'm finding that young people are really concerned about homelessness, health care, housing. They're concerned about all of the social justice issues that we should be concerned about. And so they're really our leaders. And I was so happy to be able to write the school climate change bill with them, because they came to me with an idea. And their idea I thought was great, to have climate change taught in our school system. And they actually came in my office, and with my staff, they wrote the bill. And we introduced the bill with them at a press conference, and they took the lead. And they have so far managed to lobby to get over 40 co-sponsors, and that's unheard of. I mean, these young people are high school young people. And so I have a lot of hope that they will really take over and will lead with the sense of values and passion and commitment and brilliance that I'm seeing now with young people.
How does it feel like not only having taken the House back by 40 seats plus, but having a Democratic-controlled chamber again, and one with many more women in it?
And we have a chamber with the Speaker of the House, who is a phenomenal, brilliant woman who's leading this caucus and really this country. in a path that provides for the people in terms of our overall agenda. She's strategic, she's smart, she's passionate, and she's a unifier. And so having a woman as our leader really speaks volumes to where our caucus is going. We also have many women now who are chairs and subcommittee chairs of all kinds of committees that address every single issue, every single policy. And to have a woman at the table as we write this legislation, it really adds to the entire, I think to the entire success of whatever policies that we're working on, because you have now different points of views. Shirley Chisholm used to say, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Well, these women here in Congress have brought a chair, but they're here to stay. And when you have women who are weighing in and expanding the discourse on all kinds of issues. I mean, and you see these young women of color who are here, who came here hitting the ground and running. And I'm really proud of the fact that the squad, they call me the OG. And it's really a badge of honor that I wear, because it's, you know, finally we have a lot of women here who have hit the ground running. They're passionate, they're smart, and they know where they're going, and they know how to take care of and serve their constituents as public servants.
Tell me more about Speaker Pelosi, who is from just across the bay from where you represent. There are so many, you know, the other side, the Republicans are so critical of her and portraying her as nasty and using all these negative adjectives. Does that match anything you know about the woman who is now, for the third time, I believe, Speaker of the House, at least the second time.
Yeah, no, it doesn't match. And you know, and she understands that's just them, and she just, I won't say ignores it, but she works straight ahead and moves straight ahead. She, of course, represents the district across from mine. It's a very progressive district. Her district loves her, they support her, and they know that she's a national leader. And the Republicans, the more they demonize her, I think the more people really begin to see who Nancy Pelosi really is, and that is an astute politician, a great leader, and a woman who leads with her values.
Tell me, from an insider's perspective, how does it change the body, the organization, the kind of legislation that's addressed to have not only a female speaker, but so many more female members of the House?
Well, I'll give you one example. One is the Violence Against Women Act. Okay, we passed that months ago as one of the first bills we passed off of the floor, and the Speaker understood the importance of that. And guess where it lies with all the other bills we passed? Right on Senator Mitch McConnell's desk. And so she really knows the importance of prioritizing legislation and moving it to the floor and over to Mitch McConnell's, to the Senate. And it's legislation that, when you look at the legislation as it relates to pay equity for women, that's off of the floor. And so all of the gender-specific equality policies, she definitely leads on and understands. I mean, she's a mother of 5, she's a grandmother, and she knows the inequities as it relates to women in this system.
Saying all this as you have about it stopping on Mitch McConnell's desk, does that take away all the, all the benefits, all the glory, as it were, of you being back in a body that more matches your politics?
No, because we've done our job. We're doing our job each and every day. The Senate has got to change. I mean, Mitch McConnell has got to hopefully go. You know, he's just disrupting what good public policy is for the people. His constituents would benefit from many of the bills that are sitting on his desk. And so I, for one, believe that the Senate must change. We're doing an excellent job here in the House under Speaker Pelosi's leadership. And we can't say just because McConnell is not going to pass these bills, we don't do our job. I mean, we have to do what we were elected to do. And so she's doing that, and the members of our Democratic caucus are doing that. We try to get bipartisan support all of the time because she really believes, and I agree, that we have to work in a bipartisan way. But if they just say no, 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 we still have to do what we have to do for the American people.
Well, and most of the commentators are saying that the Democrats have little or no chance to take back the Senate in 2020 because of the states that are up. One of them, of course, being an effort to get Mitch McConnell out of his seat in Kentucky. But do you agree that there's little chance the Democrats will take back the Senate?
No, I don't agree, and we have to work hard to take it back. If I agreed, then it wouldn't be out here trying to take it back. And if most people think that, then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, no, it's going to be difficult, but there's strategic seats that have been targeted, and we have to believe, and if we organize, and if we get our message out, and if we conduct our voter registration drives and get out to vote efforts, I think we can do it.
All right. Thank you so much, Representative Lee. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and all best luck to you in the work that you do.
Thank you very much. It's been great being with you.
That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website at pbs.org/tothecontrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next time.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the Cornell Douglas Foundation, committed to encouraging stewardship of the environment, land conservation, watershed protection, and eliminating harmful chemicals. Additional funding provided by the Wallace Genetic Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary.
Be more PBS.